A couple months ago, I made a video covering a small indie game called Motortown, and it ended up doing pretty well for both me and the game itself. The thing is though, when I made that video, I only had maybe 15 to 20 hours played at the time, and even though that initial impression was so strong, I made a whole video gushing about it, I still really didn't yet have a full grasp on most of what Motortown had to offer, and I thought that the honeymoon period could maybe wind down and that I'd end up moving on after a few weeks. But yet again, I could not have been more wrong about this game, because Motortown just keeps getting better. Game updates have added new vehicles and major new features alongside huge improvements for online play that have made dedicated servers way more efficient and easy to use. And this comes alongside the influx of new and returning players that have made communities like the subreddit or the official Discord much more lively and more helpful for new players, with resources being easier to find now and better updated. After that first video, my small dedicated server blew up, and instead of averaging maybe 3 to 5 players, we've been regularly seeing well over 20. The server very seriously came to life and suddenly felt more like a classic MMO like RuneScape or something than, say, a Minecraft server with your buddies. And this alone was such an energy shift for the game to me. I was used to interacting with other players, but it was just a few of us kinda all doing the same thing and figuring out the game together. Now when I log in, the map is littered with not only players all over, but also their NPC vehicles working away along their determined routes. And it's always fun to drive past other players as they do their own thing, or drive past their customized company bus just working away. Or, for me anyway, logging in to see a huge car meet happening right in front of my house. This big server gameplay has really changed the perspective of Motortown to me. I know I use Horizon 5 as a bit of a punching bag sometimes, but seriously, when I log into that big budget first party AAA game, I maybe see 2 or 3 players that phase in and out of existence right around me, but I never see big groups or any players far across the map or anything, because that's just not how their servers work. And that makes the map feel empty and lonely. Back in Motortown, I can pan around and see nameplates from a dozen players that are miles away, and that instantly adds so much scale and perspective to the world. I want to be clear that Motortown is absolutely still a fun game to play solo, but this big online experience that I didn't really have yet in that first video scratches an itch for me that hasn't been satisfied since the TDU2 days. And as someone that plays a lot of MMOs, Motortown hits on those feelings a lot more than I initially expected. On that topic, I want to talk about the scale of Motortown's world, because oh my god, I really didn't appreciate how massive this game feels when I made that first video. Now, it obviously helps that none of the cars are super fast in this game. In Horizon, again, for example, you can pretty easily hit 300 miles per hour in some cars, which makes the map feel smaller. But I've barely ever hit half of that in Motortown, and I think even the fastest cars top out around 180, which makes traversal time slower. But even so, the North Island alone, which is where I spent most of my time for that first 20 hours, is already a good-sized map. In my 240 horsepower muscle car at a top speed run, it still takes me close to 10 minutes to lap this island. And this is just the small island. Lately, I've finally started to explore the much bigger OG island, and the scale of it is immense. Now, statistically speaking, Motortown's entire map is actually fairly close in size to Horizon 5's, but because the sense of speed is better and the cars are slower, and Motortown does a good job of breaking up your line of sight a lot more, it just feels so much bigger. On a live stream the other day, I spent an hour and a half getting a truckload of iron from here to here. Granted, that was at an average speed of like 10 miles an hour on lots of twisty, muddy roads that I was very ill-equipped for, but the drive was still delightful. I went through so many gorgeous areas. There were dense forests, wooden bridges over rivers and waterfalls, rocky cliff sides, massive ravines, and vast open fields bordering the ocean. It was such a journey. There was a very real sense of exploration, which isn't something car games are often known for. And I actually want to spend some time talking about this nearly 2-hour journey, because this was a bit of gameplay that, if you just explained it to me, wouldn't sound like fun, but ended up being legitimately one of the best times I've ever had in a video game. So, in its latest update, MotorTown added an entirely new supply chain. You can now take iron ore or coal from the mines and deliver that to these new warehouses in the southeast. And then the harbor can import coal and iron, and you can manufacture beams and coils with the coal and iron from the mines at the new steel mill. And then those can be delivered to, I think, a car factory. With all of this came some new vehicles, including a new high-level off-road dump truck called the Atlas that can haul the coal and iron really well on rough terrain, which is all that separates the mines and the warehouse. Now, in my infinite wisdom, I ignored the advice of more experienced players and decided that my very lightly modified Jamusi Semi without a winch would be just fine hauling 30 tons of iron across some of the most rugged terrain in the entire map. Luckily though, I wasn't alone, and had a massive convoy of players along with me for the trip. We had a handful of Atlas trucks all hauling their own loads, and an entire fleet of support vehicles ready to guide me, push me, and tow me out of all the tight spots I would inevitably find myself in. And what ensued was an insanely difficult but so fun 1.5 hour long journey with some of the most helpful players in the world. My poor little overloaded Semi could barely make it up an anthill, but we were determined to get it to its destination over 30 kilometers away. So we had multiple wreckers on standby, we had trucks pushing me from behind, or even this guy in a pickup that would push my Semi to try and help me around corners. We even had a fuel tanker that could fill us up along the journey, and there was even someone that built a fully custom and fully functional sign truck that was guiding us along the right path while we took this shortcut through the fields. I even had a passenger with me the whole time that would occasionally get out and help push on foot, even if it was just for moral support, because I doubt they were really helping that much. But I just want to focus on this for a minute and encourage you all to appreciate the sheer depth of mechanics and systems working together to create this completely emergent gameplay. I mean, at a base level, we've got solid server infrastructure that allows a group of 20-some players all over the world to interact in real time without any weird network shenanigans or lag or bugs. And then we've got all these different vehicles that all serve real purposes. You've got the dump trucks and trailers hauling loads of materials to supply factories and warehouses. You've got these amazing 4-wheel drive Brutus wreckers that have tow cables you can attach to just about anywhere. You've got smaller support and scout trucks that helped in a pinch or helped guide us along our path. Some of them even using fully custom lighting systems to either light the road ahead of us better or help point us one way or the other. We had a fuel tanker that was apparently also stocked up with coolant and traffic cones so he could keep us supplied and keep our engines running cool if they overheated. And we just had a few people riding in passenger seats that were able to get out and manage tow cables or help push while the driver was still controlling the truck. And all of this is wrapped inside of a highly detailed physics engine that allows for all these unique situations, like pulling a truck with multiple tow cables attached to different vehicles, or even daisy chaining multiple trucks together and also pushing from behind to get my truck and trailer over a muddy hill, and even Even though it doesn't do much, getting out and pushing is a mechanic in the game that has a tangible effect on the physics. There were just so many different systems at play during this journey, and it all kinda worked flawlessly. It didn't feel janky or cobbled together. We didn't have to work around buggy features. We could just trust that the mechanics would work more or less the way we expected them to. And that led us towards so many unique and creative solutions, which made for some really fun gameplay. To bring it back to that MMO analogy, it was almost like playing a dungeon or a raid where you're all playing different classes and filling your individual roles and doing your own part to accomplish a bigger, unified goal. This was a level of unscripted, large-scale cooperative gameplay that I just never expected to find in a driving game. But there goes MotorTown, exceeding my expectations yet again. Now, there were two other big features that I hadn't really had the chance to experience yet in that first video, and one of them was the housing system. I've been a big Sims player ever since the first game, and I love some good house building. The only other car game that's really had that was TDU back in the day, so I was curious to see what MotorTown's housing had to offer, and surprise, surprise, I was blown away yet again. On dedicated servers, you can rent property for a price and length determined by the server's owner, and I picked this lovely piece of land by the sea. In that first video, I had bought and built a few structures on that land, but hadn't yet furnished them, and this ended up leading to yet another big emergent multiplayer experience that I fully was not expecting. The first step on my journey was to travel around and tour other players' houses on the server so that I could get some ideas of how to decorate my place. And then I learned that there were a handful of big furniture stores all around the map, as well as a couple somewhat secret spots to buy other unique pieces. And when you want to buy, say, a couch, you actually have to load that couch into a vehicle that can carry it, then hopefully you can strap it down and drive back to your house to unload it. I love how many things in this game just use real logic and not video gamey impossible inventory sizes where you can just put the couch in your pocket and teleport back home. You have to solve these problems using real world solutions. So when decorating my house, I actually went furniture shopping and then had some buddies help me load up a lot of the stuff I bought and bring it back to my house. I mean, we all understand the feeling of having that one friend with a pickup that we can call on to help us move, but when has a video game ever successfully emulated that before now? We brought a ton of furniture back to my estate and unloaded most of it into my garage for me to pick through and start furnishing my house. You can get pretty detailed with it, and there's a limited but decent variety of furniture, but the real issue is that you sadly can only have a total of 51 placeable objects on your property, which meant for me that I had a really detailed bedroom and a very nice office, and then quickly ran out of budget and had to get creative with the few props I had left. I ended up hosting a bit of a garage sale and just let everyone else on the server pick through all my leftovers. I would love to see a higher furniture cap in the future, maybe even let the server owner manage that, because there probably are performance issues to consider on bigger servers with a lot of furnished houses. I'd also, of course, love to see more furniture in general, including more useful things. You can, for example, sit in chairs or sleep in beds, which does advance time, but I want to see, like, placeable working car lifts, or maybe a computer that actually lets you shop online for furniture or car parts or something, I don't know. Just having more purpose and function to the housing system would be cool. That said, it still is a neat bonus activity in the game, and I love that all the owned properties act as fast travel points. Now, there's one more thing in MotorTown that I hadn't really been able to sink my teeth into yet when that first video was made. made, and that was actually the racing. Funny enough, the racing in MotorTown is arguably one of its underdeveloped features, but with a community, it still becomes one of the greatest things the game can offer. And before we get too far into it, I do just need to say that underdeveloped in MotorTown has a bit of a different meaning. There still is a lot of functionality here. Not only are there a handful of real racetracks around the map with global time trial events, but there's also a highly detailed and very easy to use route creator that can even export and share routes between players. So for example, we have this whole channel on our Discord server for routes that any player could copy and edit and import into their game. You can set up custom rules to make sure everyone is using the approved engines or cars from a decided list, or even build spec race cars that other players can purchase fully configured with the workshop system. And race payouts are automatically awarded to every participating player based on finishing position, but the payouts are super small, and I'd want to see them increased, even though I know that could perhaps lead to some possible money exploit. But that aside, just like with so much of the rest of MotorTown, you can create some truly unique races that simply do not or cannot exist in really any other racing game out there. For example, we were testing some things for an upcoming big race in the server last week and realized that you can have a fully functioning Le Mans style start, where the players all have to run to their cars at the beginning of the event. And that alone is something I don't think I've ever seen in another car game, but it is a huge part of automotive racing culture and history. On top of this, we're implementing some special challenges into this big race in order to mix things up a bit. At a few set checkpoints along the nearly 45-minute long route across most of the map, we're having players get out of their cars mid-race to complete challenges, like picking up a gas can and running it across a parking lot to fill up a car at the other end, or getting out of your car to load another car onto a trailer before getting back in your own car and continuing the race. And there are so many more possibilities here. We wanted to keep things relatively simple for this event, but in theory, you could literally create a maze or a parkour course on someone's property that a player would have to complete in order to finish the race. And you could verify that by placing some set object at the end of the course, like a burger or a small piece of furniture that the player then has to take with them and display to the officials at the end of the race. You know, this is like some serious Top Gear challenge stuff, or for my millennial viewers, like The Amazing Race. I still feel like I've just scratched the surface with the amount of crazy custom events you could host in MotorTown. But now that we have started to set up some custom routes, and we've built some spec race cars for leagues, and gotten a handful of events under our belts, I feel like I can much more confidently say now that the racing in MotorTown is incredible, as long as you have a group to race with. Admittedly, there just isn't much to the solo racing yet, and I do want to see that get developed further. In the meantime though, I know that the Workers League is often hosting races for players if that's something you're interested in. And of course, my own server is starting to dive into that as well. So in the 2 months I've now been playing, MotorTown has just kept improving for me, and I feel no need to slow down yet. There has still been so much content to discover. I've only driven a tiny portion of the available cars, and not only has the big server experience completely altered the gameplay for me, but also the dev has been putting out some big updates. I mean, in the latest major patch, we got that entirely new supply chain, a completely reworked vehicle accessory system that is so good and lets you build things like custom wings or roll cages. We got multiple new vehicles, some changes to the map, and some major performance improvements and quality of life. And MotorTown's future is looking very bright, because the single dev behind the project has actually just recently hired on a second programmer, which hopefully means that the already pretty quick development will start moving even faster. A lot of assets are also still being rebuilt from scratch, and with the community being bigger than ever, there is a wealth of new and hopefully helpful feedback and a lot of testers that are ready to help steer the game towards its eventual 1.0 release. So I'm excited to see how MotorTown keeps developing over these next few months, and folks, thank you all for watching and for your immense support on that first video. I'll see you in the next one.